I have a small secret I've been keeping for a while, which is that I don't budget my money. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not aware of how much I'm spending or saving. Rather, I make sure all of my different accounts are funded first, and then I let myself spend whatever is left. I've been following this process ever since I graduated and started working a corporate job. Doing this allowed me to save and invest enough money to take the leap and quit my job last year, and also acquire a small business. I did this all without feeling any sense of guilt in my spending, while still very much enjoying my life and the experiences that I chose to partake in. The truth is, I briefly tried budgeting in the beginning, but it just didn't work for me. I'll share more on why that was the case for me, and I'll also walk you through how I naturally structured my money differently than the conventional and quite rigid 50-30-20 budgeting advice. I'll also share the percentage breakdowns of how I allocated my money so that I was able to save and invest a multiple six-figure net worth in my early 20s. By the way, I'm Carly. On this channel, I talk about financial literacy and consumerism, so don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss my videos. Conventional budgeting advice is to follow the 50-30-20 rule, where 50% of your post-tax income is allocated toward needs like rent, utilities, groceries, transportation, or childcare. 30% is allocated to discretionary spending like eating out, shopping for non-essentials, maybe subscriptions and travel, and then 20% is allocated to savings and debt repayment. While I think that's a great guideline to start with if you're new to managing money, I don't think it should be a strict rule by any means. I think it depends on what your income is and what your goals are. In my situation, following the 50-30-20 rule when I started working a corporate job meant that I would have allowed myself several thousands of dollars toward my needs category, but my actual needs didn't cost nearly that much. Just because I had the money to spend on rent and utilities didn't mean that I had to spend all of it in that area. Furthermore, it didn't make sense to me to spend 30% of my income on discretionary spending. I wanted to allocate a higher percentage to savings and debt repayments instead to give myself more options in the future. And maybe that future option was to buy a home, maybe it was to get another degree. I wasn't saving for anything in particular. The option I ended up taking was to buy back my time and to give myself 2 years of runway off of working a 9-to-5 job. But I wouldn't have had the same freedom if I had allocated and spent all 30% of my income when I didn't need to. Also, when it comes to the 50-30-20 rule of thumb, for those of us who are trying to get established in early adulthood, it would behoove us to spend far lower than 50% on our overhead expenses. And I'm mostly thinking about rent and transportation when I say that, because when those costs are low, generally speaking, other overhead costs are generally lower too. When we do this, we have more flexibility to spend more or save more on any given month. If you can find the cheapest possible living situation for your standard of living, you can choose to fast track your goals by allocating more towards saving and investing, or you can choose to have months where you enjoy your other experiences more. I have done both of those. For me, the majority of the time I decide to save more, but I have also had months where I chose to spend more and enjoy my different experiences, and I did it without guilt because I knew that my overhead expenses were low, so the next month I could go back to my usual habit of saving. Those decisions should be based on your personal goals and also what you want to get out of where you're living. So let's talk about how I actually allocated my income. In my first year of working, when I calculated my rough breakdown, instead of my pie chart looking like this, 50-30-20, it looked more like this, 17.6, 8.4, and 74. To be clear, I didn't go in with the intention of making my savings 17, 8, 74. That's just the way things happened to fall after I prioritized all of the accounts I wanted to fund. Saving was such a high priority for me, so I made what I had left work for me when it came to discretionary spending. I set everything up automatically so that my 401k, Roth IRA, HSA, employee stock purchase plan, any other accounts were funded before I even saw my paycheck. Then my discretionary spending was whatever was deposited into my checking account with rent and utilities subtracted. To be fair, my discretionary spending amount sometimes changed on a monthly basis depending on whether certain accounts were maximized up to their limit or not. Usually I had less discretionary spending money at the beginning of the calendar year because I always front-loaded my contributions. I did that because some of those were employee benefits, and it was just an insurance of sorts for me in case I left before the end of the calendar year, so I knew I had maximized those benefits. And then by around the June timeframe, after different accounts started getting maxed out, I would give myself a little bit more leeway. I never had guilt spending this money because I already knew I had taken care of myself financially by the time that money hit my checking account. Of course, eventually, as I moved to New York, I spent more of my percentage income on rent and discretionary spending. New York is an expensive city. I wasn't saving as much as I had before, but I was also okay with it because I had built some financial foundation at that point. And that was the lifestyle I decided to live at the time. It's always a balance, and I can still enjoy the city and be responsible for my finances. There were certain months when I spent more money than what my discretionary spending allowed, mostly in the beginning of the year. As I mentioned earlier, I have a whole video on how I use sinking funds, but essentially these are dedicated savings buckets for known upcoming expenses. I keep these in my high yield savings account as separate buckets so that I can allocate money toward these buckets. I have sinking funds for traveling or for gifts or any other miscellaneous expenses that might come up. So if there were any outstanding reasons why I was spending a bigger chunk of money on any particular month, I would have covered it with my sinking funds. When I briefly tried budgeting, I found that it took a lot of mental energy. I tried using an Excel sheet, I tried different free apps. All of these are quite labor intensive in the sense that I have to sit down every week, go through my receipts or credit card statements and log all of my expenses, and in some cases manually categorize them too. On top of that, I have to decide, does the spending make sense to me or do I want to change anything? All of that is easily at least an hour of work a week that is not quite worth it for me. Of course, there are budgeting apps where I can pay a monthly fee to have them scrape my expenses and categorize them from my credit card. Ultimately, I didn't need that based on the way I managed my money because I already know I'm spending within a specific allocated amount. It doesn't really matter to me how my spending habits break down in different categories, as long as I don't go over my discretionary spending amount. So it just wasn't worth the cost for me then or now. And that's not to say I don't know how much money I'm spending every month. While my bills are on autopay, I do look at my credit card statements every month and make sure that my spending habits are in check and I'm not paying for anything I shouldn't be paying for. So no, I don't budget in the traditional sense, and that's been a conscious, sustainable choice for me. I found that as long as I automate the important things, my investments, my savings, I don't need to track every dollar to feel in control. In fact, I feel much freer not doing so. This approach might not work for everyone, but it's helped me build financial freedom without the stress of micromanaging my spending. And in the end, I feel like that's what matters most, is creating a system that works for you and supports the lifestyle that you want to live. So if you've been feeling burnt out by budgeting, I hope this gave you a new way to think about managing your money. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're interested in the lifestyle I created with financial literacy and mindful consumption, you should check out my thoughts on what I learned from my low-buy year.